Did God curse or not curse? That is the question. Welcome to Curious Christianity. Today we're talking about the curses in Genesis 3. What is the curse on the woman? Find out in just a minute. So, I have been reading a lot on Genesis chapter 3. I'm reading a lot of papers, and they all talk about these three curses, or three judgments or punishments. And sometimes they want to use different terminology to define it. But for the most part, that's what we're talking about. And it's been really, really fascinating to see the diversity of views on this. But is that really what's going on? Or is it mostly a presupposition? Is it something that people believe because they've been taught it by other people? Let's dive into the text a little bit today, and I want to explore what the curse is, or what it should be, how we should talk about Genesis 3:16, and what it is that God is supposed to have cursed Eve with, or the woman, or how does this work? So, let's look at what he says to the woman. He says to the woman, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. But let's focus on the beginning of this. It just says, God says, to the woman, he said, da 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 da. Does he say the same thing to the serpent and to Adam? And he says to the serpent, right? The Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all the livestock. That's quite a bit different. That is quite a bit different. And God also says this to Adam, because you listened to your wife and ate the fruit from the tree which I commanded to you not to eat, cursed is the ground because of you. But God doesn't say that to the woman. This is a really big deal. And I'll just go ahead and say, I don't see a curse or punishment on the woman. I don't think it's in the text. The thing that a lot of people have pointed out is they're all like, well, no, but what happens to the woman, and their explanations for her desire for the husband and the fact that he'll rule over her are because she wasn't submissive to Adam, or because she, should have had asked his opinion, or all these sorts of notions. But I don't see that at all. Why doesn't the text say, because you didn't submit to your husband, therefore this will be your judgment? It's missing. Now, of course, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but it is a good argument when you should expect it to be there. So in other words, there should be this pronouncement of judgment and a declaration of, this is why you did it, and now these are the consequences. But it's not there. It's missing. And so, of course, the question has to be asked, if it's missing, why is it missing? It's a really big deal if there's a distinction here. If God is doing something different with the woman than he did with the serpent and with Adam. And it seems to me that we have to go back a little bit earlier in the text to start to see that there is a big difference. There is a difference between Adam and the woman. And it starts off in Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 2, God creates Adam, and then he has Adam name all the beasts of the field. And he puts them in the garden, and he gives Adam this command, not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But why doesn't he just wait? God could have just waited a little longer and given the command to Adam and Eve, but instead he gives it to Adam before Eve is even made. And it's like, what? Why? If he gives the command to Adam, and this is something that a lot of people have noted, that when Adam is there in the garden, and then the serpent's there, and the woman is there, and the woman is talking to the serpent, and of course everyone brings attention to the fact that the woman says, oh, well, we can't eat from the tree, nor should we touch it. And everyone says, like, well, she adds on to what God said. And there's a little bit of a debate over, like, okay, well, does she add on to what God said, or did Adam tell her, or how did this work? Did Adam tell her correctly? And now I'll just tell you my short hypothesis on this is that I do think it's that Adam probably told her. And I even think that it's likely that Adam probably told her, hey, don't even touch it. Right? He's like, well, I'm going to do one better. Like, don't eat it and don't touch it. So I think that was probably Adam's addition to what was said. And so it could even be his fault in that regard. But either way, what happens here is that the woman was not given the command, but Adam was. And so, in short, I believe that God makes a covenant with Adam when he gives him this command. And so Adam is the federal head and the leader, so to speak, and it's his job not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that's why there is a difference here, because the command was given to Adam. God didn't give it directly to the woman, which is very interesting. So, God makes a covenant with Adam. Adam breaks the covenant, which is why God says directly to Adam, because you have done this, therefore, all of these things will happen. The woman, however, now God is basically making a new promise that's going to happen with the woman. But the woman will not be judged in the same way that the serpent and Adam were judged. So what's missing, of course, is this proclamation of judgment. There are only two curses in Genesis 3, a curse on the serpent and a curse on the ground. But there is no curse for the woman. And so I think what's really important is when we're reading the scriptures, are we reading the scriptures to get out of it what's there, or are we reading into the scriptures our own preconceived notions and biases that have been passed down potentially from other teachers and scholars? But I think that it's important that we're careful. We're careful with the text. And if someone challenges our view or interpretation, then we need to be open to listening to what it is they have to say and doing our best to read the text for what it says and not merely reading out of the text our own views or our own biases. So I think that there's only two curses, which is changing the narrative and how we should interpret Genesis 3:16. If there's only two curses present, then how we go about understanding 3:16 could be significantly different. Because as I read commentaries and doctoral papers on 3:16, most of them assume, and they note in there that they assume that it's a judgment on the woman and therefore should be read in the light of negative consequences. If that's false, though, then there's no need to read negative consequences into Genesis 3:16. The Bible is completely open to interpreting it as something that God says to the woman, and I do think that there are negative consequences that God is pointing out to her. but they're not judgments based on what she did. They're effects. They're kind of the consequences of those actions and how things are going to be moving forward. Now, I don't have time to dive into all the details of how I think things did affect the woman and will affect things moving forward. But I think that it's time for people to take a serious look that when they read this passage in Genesis 3, that curse shouldn't be a part of it for the woman. And we, as Christians and studiers of the Bible, should be careful to note what does God say and what God doesn't say. And be careful to follow the words of God exactly as he says them and exactly as he means them. Bless you guys.